Julia Arredondo, over there, is an artist and author of over 20 zines, including Guide to Being Broke and Fabulous and Spells to Kill Your Boss. Julia is originally from South Texas and is currently in transit as a working artist. Her educational background includes formal training in printmaking and independent publishing from the Maryland Institute College of Art and an MFA with a focus on book arts and creative entrepreneurship from Columbia College, Chicago. I like the sound of that, creative entrepreneurship. Julia's small press background includes startup publishing entities Vice Versa Press, Curandera Press, and the DIY media channel QTVC Live. So clever. Julia continues to print and publish under the moniker Future Juju, and you can find her on Instagram. Go away. So Julia, everybody. Yeah. Hannah Batsel, whose handmade work can be found in university and museum collections around the world. Hannah received a BFA in printmaking and book arts from the University of Georgia and an MFA in the same from the Columbia College Chicago Center for Book and Paper Arts in 2016. She has a new book out and it's back there. I'm just saying, afterwards you're going to want to check it out. It's illustrated and it's a children's book and I've already got it and my kids love it, but I love it too. Jill Gage is the custodian, that's such a cool title, the custodian of the John M. Wing Foundation on the history of printing at the Newberry Library. And she's currently working on an exhibition for early 2025 on immigrant printing in Chicago. And we'll hear a lot more about what she's up to and what's in store at the Newberry. Eric Von Haynes merges traditional, that's you, merges traditional and contemporary printing with a focus on collaboration and community involvement. In 2007, he established Flat Lens Press, producing art and printed materials to foster worldwide artistic exchange. And he presently serves as the president of the Chicago Printers Guild, which is sponsoring Paper Jam in just a few weeks. It started. I'm focused on the tabling event on October 21st, where we'll be there. And Julia is doing a workshop this weekend.
Saturday.
On zine making away from the computer, right? Yeah. And last but not least, Audrey Niffenegger, who I have to say, the seed of Artist Bookhouse was born, in Audrey's head. And it has become a collective dream with a board and with an audience and all of you and with donors and volunteers and an executive director and a program assistant. So it's really, it's grown. But it all started with Audrey. And she's going to be moderating tonight. Most of you know all about her already. She's a writer and visual artist who's been making artist books for many years. She helped to found the Columbia College Center for Book and Paper Arts and taught in the MFA in Book and Paper Arts program there for many years. She's the founder of Artist Bookhouse. And Audrey, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you also, all of you, for turning out. I mean, collectively, there's an absolutely astonishing amount of talent and expertise in this room. I always like to try to begin at the beginning, but in the case of the book arts, there's never any one point where it really begins. It's always beginning out of something else. In the case of Artist Bookhouse, we have our beginnings in the Columbia College Chicago Center for Book and Paper Arts, which had its beginnings in paper press and Artist Book Works and a number of other small institutions that fed into the Columbia institution. And so it just keeps going, and I keep thinking sooner or later we're going to make it stick. So I thought that for an opener here, that I would ask each of you to talk a little bit about how you first intersected with the book arts and/or the book arts in Chicago.
In my University of Georgia program, it was by far the coolest media that was going on, I felt. And the reason I live in Chicago now is because of the Center for Book and Paper Arts. When I was looking to go to grad school, it was just such a perfect fit. I've been doing it ever since. I like to tell people that everything that goes into making a book, every job, every design skill, everything. I've done it at some point. And yeah, here I am now.
I think the most influential thing for me regarding books and book arts was that I would go to Sam's Club when I was a kid and with my grandparents. And I would just be like, hey, leave me in the book aisle. Just do your shopping, leave me in the book aisle. And there's something about books. And I also, grew up mixed Mexican-American, Italian. I would have to go to the library to research my cultural heritage because the traditions weren't being passed on to me. So I had to actively research these traditions through books when I was a kid. This was pre-internet. And so books have always been just a vessel of like self-realization of so much. And when I went to art school, I think it became apparent that art, fine art, conceptual art could exist within the pages, within the covers of books. And yeah, since I was 17, I've been fascinated by the medium.
I also have been fascinated by the materiality of books when I was a kid. I came through book history, and when I came to the Newberry 20 years ago, it was really as a book historian. But as I was so interested in Cunables and 17th century books, he also put contemporary artist books next to those. And then I was like, oh wait, people still make books? Like I can meet people who make the books that so interested me in the 15th century. I can meet these people and I can talk to them about how they do it. And that really opened up a whole new world to me for understanding book arts past and present.
What are you doing right now? I'm just curious to get a little snapshot of everybody's kind of daily book arts lives.
So after I graduated from Columbia College, I was mostly making artist books and selling them through art dealers and making my living that way. And then I got roped into a very boutique independent publishing house called Candor Arts, which was such a dream job. I was designing and producing these handmade art objects for people in very small, limited edition quantities. And that was amazing. And then 2020 happened, and shipping and paper went crazy. And so that's when I started getting into traditional publishing, and that's what I have mostly been doing for the past couple of years. I have 2 children's books out. I'm currently working on a project for adults with Chronicle out in San Francisco. So literally what I'm doing day to day, I just finished a huge linoleum block of the typeface for my new book. They said I could design the book as much as I wanted, so I'm creating the typeface first. And I don't want it to look like a typeface, so I'm carving 5 capital A's, 5 lowercase a's, 5 capital B's, 5 lowercase b's, so that it keeps that kind of handmade feel. So that's the project I'm currently working on, and I'm always looking for something new. I just wrapped up a really fun project with the Newberry Library, where I was working with their movable books, pop-up books exhibition that closed recently, making a little takeaway pop-up for them. So yeah, all kinds of stuff.
My private work right now is focused on folds. I do a series called Flotsam and Jetsam. And so the new one I'm working on is called Folds. The last one was called Waves. But for my client type work, like the other work, I'm working with Tom Burnwood on a book right now that we just got grants for. And 3 months ago, it sold out, but I was happy to work with Diana Solis, who's a queer photographer from Pilsen, on a book release called Loose. It was Offset and Rizzo, and she's been touring with that, and she just was awarded a 3 Arts, part of the 3 Arts family a couple months ago. I work in a lot of different places all the time, so I guess I should say too, I'm also really working on producing things for the Guild. Like all the Paper Jam collateral right now, it's all been printed on my shop. With all the different artists that are going to be there, and we're going to create a publication at the end of this. So I have documentary photographers, and there's a lot going on. You guys just come through. I'll leave it there.
The first is this exhibition in 2025 called Immigrant Printing in Chicago. I think right now it's called like Chicago Melting Pot, like it's a Simpsons-y title, like a Chicago melting pot of printing. I am interested in both printing by and for immigrants in Chicago and sort of looking at it from different angles. I'm also really curious, so part of it is historical materials. We will be working with contemporary printers and book artists. So I'm also really happy to hear from any of you who are interested in that, both to have items in that exhibition and to do programming and possibly a takeaway like Hannah did, not a pop-up, but a takeaway. This exhibition is really sort of trying to redefine or rethink our collection development policy in terms of what kinds of printing and artist books we collect, showing the seams of our history of collecting and why it looks the way that it does, and sort of pressing on the issues around that. So that is for 2025. I'm really interested in that. It's been a lot of fun so far. The project that I have for 2027 goes from contemporary Chicago printing to 14th century Korea. We recently discovered that we have the oldest Korean metal type in possibly the world, but at least in the United States. It's from the early 15th century, which is crazy if you do book arts, because no 15th century Western type survives. It's a long story as to how we got that. So we are doing a project now which is about pre-Gutenberg printing, but I'm also really interested with that project in the same way. I love sort of a beginning to present story. It drives my colleagues crazy. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing the 14th century through the 21st century. So I'm really interested in working with people to think about contemporary Asian printing and paper making. We were actually talking about that earlier. So those are two of the projects that I have right now that are very book arts concentrated.
I've got work in a show down there at Del Mar College. Got a show going on in St. Louis about independent publishing. And so my specialty is what I like to understand as occult Americana. And I'm just sort of researching how occult practices and print intersect. And I'm really having a lot of fun there.
You're doing amazing, interesting stuff in each kind of your own solar system, attracting people to you and collaborating with people. And part of something I've observed over the years is this very organic tendency in art scenes where there gets to be a lot of energy around something, and a lot of people come together and make the thing happen, and it happens for a while, and maybe there's a few cycles of it working really well. And then, everybody starts to maybe think about going and doing something else, and it kind of naturally comes apart again. And so I guess my question has to do with siloing. And one of the reasons to have a center is to change the flow of gravity in a place, so that for a while anyway, everybody wants to come be in that place and maybe meet some new people and have some ideas they might not have had otherwise. And so part of the reason that we're trying to do Artist Book House, and part of the reason we're here tonight, is in a way to try to just spitball ideas, and kind of get input from people, everybody, not just those of us who are sitting up here. But I'm curious to know, first of all, from the panelists, what would really attract you? What would get you to come out of your neighborhood and come to us?
So I work with a lot of book historians who actually have no idea how books are made. Like, they've never held type, they've never printed, and they come up with all these theses based on something they don't know very well, right? And one of the things I've tried to do at Newberry the past few years is to try to connect book historians and book artists. I think they have a lot to talk about, and I think they're really fascinating in conversation. And so the idea that, like, a community space for people who aren't necessarily practitioners, but are, would like to, again, just like to learn how a book is made. I mean, I think that's a really important thing. So community classes, or just even like one-day seminars, like geared for, this is again very niche to me, to people who do book history. Like, and book history suffers from the same problems, I think, as the book arts in Chicago, is that there's not a center for it. People are sort of wandering around doing their own things. So I'd say that just the ability, people who want to dip their toe in or understand it a little bit better, but don't necessarily want to make books, And then for me, I sit at the Newberry, and sometimes I think, well, people find their way to the Newberry because it's like the book center of Chicago, but it's not. And lots of people, young book artists I meet, don't know that much about the Newberry and aren't necessarily interested in it. So it's like my job to go out and meet people, and I really want to meet young artists and tell them about the Newberry, or figure out how I can help them in their work or collect them or talk to them about what they're doing. So for me, just the ability to meet people is like in one place is a great thing, would be a great thing.
So having not only the facilities be there, but a social element, big giant tables to work on, a spread out on all day, coffee nonstop. But I think one of the barriers to entry for myself and other folks has been that the culture of these print spaces is very academic. And whenever we're going to print, we're going to work. We're going to listen to music while we print. We're going to talk to our friends. We're going to talk to our colleagues, whoever else is working there. And sometimes we want to be loud. Sometimes we want to print in the middle of the night. And so allowing for us to build our own community and cultural practices in those spaces, making room for that is really ideal.
So when we first started having MA and MFA students, back in the Pakula building, which was a wreck of a building, we gave them all keys. And so they could just be there all the time. I think some people were living there. But anyway, it made for a very lively scene.
I did a little experiment this morning and imagined that I was someone who was interested in letterpress, maybe had tried it once before, but wanted to take the next step, or at least be able to learn a little bit more than how to use a press. Letterpress being, of course, my favorite thing, the thing that I print most of my books on. And so I looked around on all the arts centers that I know, all the co-ops I know. I even Googled like Chicago letterpress classes. Currently, if you want to take a letterpress class, there's one First Time Letterpress is the name of it, class at Lil Street. And so if you're interested in letterpress, you can take that beginning class, which is going to teach you how to use a press. There's really nowhere to go from there if you want instruction beyond a beginner level. So I think that one of my worries is that people like Julia and I, who are alums of Columbia College, who are able to rise to a professional level, are going to be a dying breed in Chicago because there's no middle link there. I think that we are probably kind of self-sufficient in our work, and we're at a place where, even though we need facilities and we need help with things, and but we can kind of we've become these solar systems that Audrey's talking about, and we can do it ourselves at our level. But people who are at an intermediate level don't have anything right now. So I think that what I would hope for our book center is a higher path, not just a beginner and then stop, not just a place where people who already are experts at these things can come and squirrel themselves away and work, as I will enjoy doing, but kind of a place that can complete the path for people, that can make more people like me and Julia, who are making our own work at a professional level. So I think that what I would most want is an educational link, something above the beginner level, if that makes sense.
And I think a workspace, we're talking about the world we live in late stage capitalism. Most people are going to have to find time to do this work between jobs. So creating a space that doesn't have like these really tight windows that are really unrealistic for someone who's actually making work is, I think, would be ideal. Julie had mentioned that, but I just wanted to get a little bit more granular with that. We were talking before this about paper costs and things going up over 400% during COVID. Yeah, I mean, I was able to eat that cost because I do well, but if I was just starting, I'd have had to put it away because I come from a very practical background where I have to, my family, I have to be solid. I did, do that starting artist thing, like that, you need to be healthy. So if I had to choose, I would have had to shelve things because just we need food, right? And so for me as the president of the Chicago Printers Guild, this is my second year. The idea is like not just access, but also paying people for their labor, being very transparent about that we live in a capitalist system. Everything we do costs, and artists are usually the last one to get paid and the less appreciated, even though I believe the art paradigm, art theory culture went out, so why are they the last to get paid? So I think access and literally being honest about where money goes, the artist will come back, but without funds, we can't do that.
At SAIC, if you signed in by 10 o'clock, you could just stay all night. Oh, did I love that. And there was a whole little society of people in different departments. This was way in, 1985 we're talking here, where they just had the Columbus building.
Oh, wow.
And so all the departments were together in one space, and so you had your little pals in photo and your little pals in
You guys
fashion.
smoked back then too, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah, smoke cigarettes and stuff.
I used to time aqua tints with cigarettes, because the time it took to put it in the aqua tint box, walk down to the cafeteria, smoke a cigarette, and then come back again was exactly the amount of time it needed to be in the box. It's perfect. Anyway, I quit smoking the day I graduated from there. But yeah, the issue of transparency and remuneration. This is a big deal to us. It's the different kinds of accessibility. Financial accessibility, but also accessibility for people with disabilities. So when we were going to be in the Harley Clark, we spent a lot of time with our architect trying to work out all the elevators and lifts we were going to need in that crazy building. There were so many little tiny flights of stairs, like two stairs to get from one room to another. But if you were in a wheelchair, that was going to be a huge problem. And so we spent a lot of time figuring that out, and then of course we left. But we have been shopping for buildings, and a big part of it is it near public transit? Is it near a place you can get to by bike without getting, mowed down by some car? So we're thinking a lot about, how is everybody going to get here? And once they do get here, can they afford to take the class? And are we going to be able to afford to have, paid internships and make sure that, when people come to us, that they are feeling like the training they're getting, first of all, is extremely worthwhile. That what they've come for, they actually get. And because we have all this experience, the Center at Columbia was in business for 25 years, and we trained a whole lot of amazing graduate students, many of whom are here, that we're somehow going to be able to put out the hand and bring people on board. And so, a lot of this is why we're here tonight, just kind of getting everybody's thinking about it. But the last few years especially have borne in on everybody that it really is about community. So, because we're sort of small and we're new and we're, kind of pulling ourselves up by these completely imaginary bootstraps, we are sort of inventing it as we go along, but at the same time that is a freeing thing because we can decide what it is we're making. That thing where you're in the middle of making something and you go, actually no. No, I actually think that thing I had in mind to begin with would actually be better if it was this other thing. And because we've got experience, making a book art center, we have this platonic ideal of a book art center in our heads. But something I've really been enjoying is that this idea does actually expand as we go. So that kind of puts me in mind of the next question, which would be, let's imagine for just a second that money is no barrier. Some marvelous crew of people come along and just bestow all the money on us. What would you like? Just ask for it. We'll probably not be able to do it anytime soon, but what would it be?
I would love to see a publishing program. I think that books are such a transcendental object. The contents of books can be so many things that I think that it's important to have access to the creation of books to people who are not artists who are not designers, who don't care about even how the book looks, catering to both people who are aspiring book artists who really want to have a lot of design control over their work, and people who just want to see their work in print. Would be amazing to have someone who is in charge of sitting at a desk, and when someone comes in and says, I have this crazy idea for a book, but I don't know what book covers are made of, that person at the desk can say, well, are you sure you want it to have a cover? And start this conversation about what this person's ideas should look like in a physical form, and how this person's work can be created. And if we don't have the facilities here, which I guess we do if we have unlimited money, but I know a guy over in blank neighborhood who does do that kind of work, and you should call him. Some sort of publishing program, publishing nexus, I think would be my pie in the sky.
Sort of speaking to that, a couple of things you said made me think that I would love to see some, this might not be a surprise, a library or some sort of collection, either things that people have made, or like what Hannah was talking about, somebody comes in and said, I can't really imagine saying like, I want to make a book, I don't know what it should look like. But I would love that also as, as sort of this way of sort of documenting the center, but also kind of as inspiration.
Having artist bookhouse merchandise like you do in the corner would be, y'all already have that going, but having artist editions, bringing in artists to do like special edition artist merchandise would be so much fun. Different book artists, different graphic designers, screen printers, maybe different, bringing more of the print element, but having that sort of special edition artist merchandise arm would be super cool, and a nice store. I like shopping.
I like all your ideas. I would say peer friend of mine, Alex Valentine, teaches printing at Yale, has a shop called Sparkly Taffy Gallery, and he had the Canada Arts Canon tour and come through. So I think that would be brilliant to be able to introduce artists and their canon, even if it's not available in a context where they're sharing it, not some third party telling you what it is, because sometimes you just learn way more, to me.
Yeah, I've learned a lot by going on book tour, but it's, even for people who are commercially published, it's been kind of a vanishing experience.
I mean, I gotta say, like, a lot of the work I do publishers fairs, and the community is great and it's important. So I think, like, when I say tour in this context, it'd be like having the books within your house, within your space for a while, versus the more transactional, like, tabling, like, so.
Yeah, one of the things that I would like to do with our gallery space is to give people retrospectives. Because particularly in the book arts, it seems to be not a thing that happens all that often. And to be able to see somebody's body of work, or if not a whole body of work, a significant project. Like, one of the most significant shows I've ever seen was actually at the Newberry. It was Susan Barron's Labyrinth of Time. She took 10 years, and it was an absolutely astonishing thing, and now she's a friend of mine, which was a nice side effect. But yeah, just the ability to see things displayed without always going to special collections, and so yeah, that's a great point. Okay, I just got tired of asking questions. I think you all should ask questions.
Not that I don't want to. On the realm of what dreaming big, I would say shared services, and so grant writing, marketing, PR, etc. I think would be a very fundable thing for funders. They like collaborations like that, and to be able to amplify the work, and especially marketing, training, and things like that. So that would be something I would highly support.
So do you mean somebody on staff whose job it was to assist the artists, or do you mean classes and how to do it themselves?
Both. Peer-to-peer trainings on how to do it has worked really well in media, like how to do social media better, etc. But then also having time available, like shared time. So getting funders to fund like 200 hours of available grant writing services, and artists apply for that, or other kinds of shared services?
I'm very curious about what the collaboration between book arts and the writer looks like. I did publish one book, and the only thing that I really believed was, or knew how to do, was to get an artist to make a cover, because I believe book covers should be as iconic as record covers, and yet when you go to Barnes and Nobles, they're pretty bland, and so I'd just love to hear how you work with, novelists on your craft, because I'm sure it's a beautiful collaboration. Thank you.
I think the answer to that, I think, will probably become more and more obvious to us as we go along, but one of the things that we've been discussing, this is something I've been talking about with our architect, has to do with the fact that the studios for the various things that we're teaching, like paper making, book binding and book making, printing, that the writers' classrooms and the writers' main area, we're going to intersperse those through the building. So that if you're going to your writing class, it's going to be nestled inside of the printing studio or inside of the bookmaking studio. And so the writers are going to be sort of threaded through the whole building rather than everybody being isolated from each other. There's a kind of legendary building at MIT. I guess this doesn't exist anymore, but this is one of those stories that you hear people talk about when they're talking about how ideas are spread. But apparently this building at IIT was so horrible that nobody liked to be in their offices. And so they were constantly out milling around in the corridors, bumping into each other and getting coffee. And that this apparently resulted in the people in this building were apparently doing a lot more brainstorming with each other than people in other buildings at MIT that just sat in their offices. And so that's one way. But a more formal approach to doing this, we're planning on having a lot of classes that emphasize the back and forth between images and words, between ways to get your words onto a piece of paper. When we're at Columbia, we're in the interdisciplinary arts department, and so we spent a lot of time thinking about ways for things to manifest between media. So that there would be books that were sculpture, there would be books that were audio, We spend a lot of time trying to find unconventional ways to get text and image and the body of the book to bounce back and forth with each other. So that's always kind of the baseline of what we do. But I'd be very curious to have anybody else who wants to.
I keep thinking about this, how in every writing class that we offer, we could have a unit at the end where the paper-making teacher comes in or the bookbinder comes in, so that you're taking your first poetry class or an intermediate or an advanced one, and then you're making your chapbook. There's something about that multidisciplinarity that, as I'm finding, as somebody who's just been stuck to words for years, that bringing them into these physical objects is just transforming my creative process. And at one point, I'm working on a book of essays. At one point, it was going to be a graphic memoir with my illustrator, designer partner over there. And I feel like if I had had access to a center like this at that point, we might have known what to do. We were sort of like, we're each in our silo and trying to collaborate, and it was tricky. But if we were cross-pollinating with people who do that every day, and if we were maybe in a taking a comics class, even though that's nothing I would think of as somebody who's a nonfiction writer or writing personal essay, I think there's a lot of creativity to be had from having this all under one roof. So can you envision yourself taking a class there, even if it's
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to having you.
I made this really wild book and presented it to my collaborator, Matt Austin, if anyone knows him. And he looked at it and he said, God, it's such a pleasure object. And that sounds so dirty and like kind of weird. But I think that is, in an ideal world, what a book should be. Like when I see a book now that I really, really love and enjoy using, I always think that, like, God, it's such a pleasure object. And I think that fostering these types of collaborations and really hammering it in people's heads that the content of the book and the structure of the book are, it's impossible to separate them. They're married forever. And to emphasize the importance of that and to teach that and to show how that can be achieved. I think a natural just byproduct of that kind of ethos and that kind of teaching is that books will be better. Books will be better looking. Books will be better feeling. And I think that, yeah, by having these kind of MIT style people just milling about together, I think that will sort of come about naturally, if I had to guess.
I really appreciate this venue, and I'm a writer too, and an author, and my parents were both artists. I can't draw anything. They met at the Art Institute, got married. My son's a graphic designer. I think, writers and artists actually naturally go together, and we shouldn't be siloed. And personally, I geek out over paper making and seeing letterpress and seeing pens and seeing brushes and smelling paint. And so, my point is, if you're thinking about writing classes, which is great, please don't feel as if it needs to be a sterile room where there's nothing. And, the more messy the canvases, whatever, is really inspiring. And the other thing I was going to say, of course, is Audrey knows too, Chicago is a huge literary community with, we've got a plethora of talent here that's, I don't think, centrally tapped into. Especially when it comes to authors and writers, there is no central point. And maybe the center could become that point. And also bring, the artists and the graphic designers and the bookmakers into it. So there is overlap, and lots of overlap. It would be so exciting. And maybe even, you've already thought about this, I'm sure, artist or writer in residence. So when people drop in, they could at any time maybe see a local paper maker or a local writer doing their thing. I've actually had friends say to me, Karen, can I just come and write with you? I'm like, what? You're weird. No, but seriously, there are writers in residence that sit places and kids can come in and see a writer at work all day. Why not? Or an artist or a bookmaker. So I'm sure you've thought of the residency thing already. But to keep it local would be kind of cool, at least initially, is my thought, so that it gains a lot of momentum in the community, which we have so many talented people already to pull from. And might be exciting, especially for the younger children in the area, to come and see people actually doing their work. Thank you.
So I'm an artist, I'm a graphic designer, I'm also a writer, so something like this. Are you kidding me? And my twin sister and I are collaborating on sculptural book objects and all that. So my point is, if I want to make something, I can make something as an art, like I can put it together in my story. What I wouldn't have the understanding or skill set with would be, what if I want to put this out into the bigger world, not as a one-off, not as a 20-off, a bigger thing. So some connection to publishing and distribution that isn't just like, okay, this is a standard book or this is an art object, but what about something in the middle that can get kind of some distribution? If the center could provide that for someone like me, that would be huge.
How to self-publish, how to begin your own publishing venture, but also how to approach the existing publishing infrastructure are all things that we've got planned. Because I've noticed when I teach writing classes, that's a big thing that everybody wants to talk about. How do we get it into the world? I think that would be the first thing everybody would want to talk about if I would let them. We usually make them go through more or less the whole semester before we talk about that.
My father, he is a musician, so he's always played guitar, and it's funny that he writes, and it's interesting to see that even in that different medium of art that you can see how it's connected, because he knows how to connect words into putting it onto music, and it's cool to I've seen that since I was a little kid, and I've always been fascinated with the fact that there's individuals that can connect these things, and there's individuals that are very good at, let's just say, writing words, and then there's another individual who's really good at art, and they're able to connect and collaborate, and it's interesting to see how that is done. And I think that's important, because art is how we connect with people, and it's interesting because it shows that sometimes feelings that can be very overwhelming are feelings that other people are feeling, that you feel like, oh, nobody feels this way. And it's, I think it's just, what's very important is to connect even things that seem very opposite. So even including music, having someone that, musicians and artists and writers and all of that would be very good in the community, just very, I don't know, overlooked, that sometimes you wouldn't think, how can a writer and a musician maybe be together, and with all of that, everything needs to come together before something can be made. I don't know, I think it's very interesting to see that there's a place now that can be discussing that and not ignoring it, because I feel like it's just very overlooked, and I can feel like, oh, well, as long as I write this manuscript or write this draft or do this, then I'm good, and somebody else can do that other job. And I think it's very interesting to maybe connect all of that together, just as an individual as well as as a group. So
I wonder if the building that you're looking at could house spaces where people who are tangential to the book arts, maybe independent binders or people who are embossing book covers, could rent that space, and if somebody wanted to facilitate the production of their book, but they just took that beginner class, they don't know how to do it, you could say, oh, upstairs we've got somebody who does binding. So that artist working there, renting that space in somehow an arrangement with what you guys are doing, maybe it's an artist who comes out of there, supporting their business, but it's also growing. I don't know, it's just like, kind of working together. Suggestion?
That model you're talking about reminds me of Latitude. You guys familiar with Latitude? Okay. Where as long as you're working on your own work, like they do have some rules, but the idea is to get access, and the equipment there is phenomenal, and you can't get access to it anywhere else. You just can't. So like large scale, I just did like a 60 by 40 print. It was use the overhead camera, and I was able to get in there and do post within an hour, and it cost me like $100. I don't know if you guys understand, that's like nothing.
Yeah.
So, and the the monitors are calibrated properly, so everything is proper. It's pro. These things don't exist normally. So the idea of giving people access, I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier. True access means really being able to make something like that's ready to go out the door. I wanted to go back to the question the conversation you brought up. Music's just another language. So to me, like when I think of like music, art to me, I do a lot of collaboration. It's actually core to my practice. And so I treat every artist I work with quite different. I don't have one dogmatic way I approach. The first thing is, sometimes I might take years before I actually say, okay, let's do this. Because I want to understand what they're, like, some people are a little easier and some people are. You're just hiring me for a contract, that's different. I ask you for a brief, and I'll fulfill the brief, I'll tell you what I think you should do. But if we're doing a collaborative project, to me, I need to know you a bit. And that means understanding the language you speak. And so all those aspects of a person come into that, like what you listen to, what you eat, what you read, what you don't read. Those things are really important for me for my process. So I don't think they're dissimilar though. I think they actually really are the same, in the same universe. And I don't think there's one way of doing anything. So all of these different forms of communication and language and like lexicons, I think are important.
There's time for one more comment on it.
Sure.
The writing that anyone has heard of mine is because they're lyrics to songs, because I'm also a singer. So what I was thinking was, could the center, which has writing classes, have lyric writing classes, or maybe screenwriting classes, or if it was lyric writing classes, because I actually did study a book by a woman who has a ton of published songs. My stuff's very different, but that would bring musicians into there too, and now musicians are meeting writers. That's what it is. Yeah, because it is poetry, and it's rhythmic, but that would give that cross-pollination of that, and that's why I also brought up screenwriting, because their filmmakers would be coming in.
Even as a visual artist, constantly we're being asked to dissect our work in different ways. So we're even being used to, I have to write about my work and other people's work all the time. And so that makes me look at the work differently. And I think perhaps these different ways of approaching language offer that. And maybe you can spring new ideas that are, like I like to say, sometimes you're a little too close to the sun. So that's why I do different disciplines, so I can come back to things and not just be so dogmatic, I guess, about it. Like, oh, this worked, so I'll just keep doing it.
Okay, well, I would like to thank everybody because this was really a lot of fun, but also really food for thought. And I just really enjoyed talking with y'all. So thank you. Stay tuned. There'll be more conversations to come in the future, and I hope you'll come back because it's fabulous to see you all. Good night.